Um, Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for coming to Seminar Room. I know it was much easier to just move into the auditorium, so I really appreciate you all being here. My name is David, and I'm currently the community lead at Dune, and I'm going to be talking about understanding decentralized communities with Dune. This title actually has two meanings. First, we're going to be talking about the experience of building the Dune community, which is itself a permissionless, decentralized community, and how I think that can be helpful for thinking about DeSci. And the second is going to be actually looking at DeSci communities using Dune, which is a product, but I'll get to that in a bit. So very quickly about me. That's me, that's my real life picture, that's my profile picture, because that's what the cool kids do nowadays, I think. Quick background, I studied physics and philosophy, actually the same as the previous speaker. Long time ago, I did a PhD, I started a PhD and I dropped out, and for reasons that probably resonate with some of the people here. And then I ran a data analytics startup for a few years, and that brought me here to Dune. That's me on Twitter. So here's like a brief overview of what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to go 4 steps. First, a quick intro to Dune for people who haven't come across it before. Then I'm going to talk about decentralized reputation. And actually interesting, previous speaker mentioned credentialing. I saw slides from someone speaking later. They're going to talk about reputation. It seems to be like the topic du jour. So I hope I have something novel to say on that. Then I'm going to talk about DeSci communities and how that matches my experience at Dune, and then show you how to use Dune to actually look at what's happening in DeSci using on-chain data, because in theory it's all public, so you can't hide anything. So quick intro to Dune. I'm going to do an interactive thing, so apologies for that, I know it's early. Put your hands up if you've heard of Dune before this talk. Okay, keep your hands up, keep your hands up. Now keep your hands up if you've signed up to Dune. Okay. Now keep your hands up if you've written a query on Dune. Okay, fantastic. 3 people, amazing. Okay, so I got a rough sense of your guys' experience. So quick intro to Dune then. Why does Dune exist? Dune exists because the Web3 crypto space is really, really big and complex. There are 100 plus smart contracts blockchains. On Ethereum alone, there are 44 million smart contracts, and each one is not all unique, but a lot of them are unique pieces of software that are doing everything from creating NFTs to running DEXs to running DeSci protocols. And then there are all these people in the ecosystem, yourself included, but I'm looking at the examples of people we work with at Dune, the protocols themselves, people running chains, startups wanting to build on Web3 in the Web3 space. And they all want to understand, what the hell is going on? Like, how successful is this DEX? Which chain has the most activity on it, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a problem Dune solves. I'm going to do an interactive demo later, so I'm just going to do some screenshots for now, but I've got 2 screenshots here. This is a dashboard built on Dune. It's an overview of the NFT space. This is actually hard-coded to a specific collection, but it's dynamic. So here in the contract address, you could put a different NFT collection and see the same dashboard for that collection. It's in many ways, a kind of typical dashboarding tool. If you've ever worked with a BI product, it looked familiar. But what's unique about Dune is that this was not built by one of our in-house analysts. This was built by a member of our community. This guy in particular is called Ransom. And there are tens, hundreds of thousands of people building dashboards on Dune to help answer questions about what is happening in the Web3 and crypto space. And when you decide to become a Dune creator, or what we call Dune wizards, which quite a catchy title, this is what you see. So on the top right is your SQL editor. So everything in Dune is a table, a database table, and you can query it using SQL. And we have thousands and thousands of tables, from raw blockchain data to decoded data to abstractions built on top of it for entire sectors in the crypto space. On the left, you can explore that. And then when you run your query, you get your results in the bottom right. You make a chart or a visualization out of it. You stick it on a dashboard. Then you make that public, and then people can come view your dashboard and upvote it. I'm going to talk about that later, why that's important. And this is really powerful. Like I said before, blockchain data is enormous. The idea of having like a single team of people answering every possible question is like totally impossible. Dune's community-first approach allows us to cover the long tail of interesting use cases. So, and without having to get permission from someone to do that. And again, I'll talk about that in a bit. So that brings us to the Dune community, which is kind of Dune's secret sauce. I didn't talk about what my job is, but I will now, because it hopefully will make a bit more sense. This is, most of you, I hope, are scientists, so you're going to understand what I mean when I say this is a network. This is kind of the Dune network, as I think about it. And there's three things in it. Firstly, there's the raw data. So Dune's primary product is that we take all of this blockchain data, which is, you could get it locally yourself by running like an Ethereum node and then passing the data out, but we do that for you. We build this queryable data product, which this database product that you can query with SQL. So that's data. Then we've got our wizards who query the data using SQL. They can query it themselves, and they can also fork other people's dashboards and queries as well. So if you've used a product like GitHub before, you'll know what I mean by that. And then they query that data to create insights. If you look on the right there, they then share those insights. So they might go on Twitter and say, hey, look, I made this dashboard for this particular NFT collection. And then people in their follower group in their community will see that, and they'll be like, wow, that's cool. I'd like to be able to do that as well. And they will come to Dune and they'll build their own dashboard. And that kind of creates a viral growth loop. And that's the kind of secret sauce of how Dune works. And then finally, this little one here, the abstract one. That's a really cool thing that's becoming more and more important. When wizards discover there's a really nice abstraction. So for example, NFT exchanges. There are lots of different NFT exchanges, OpenSea, for example, and they all kind of look the same. And so if you want to know what's happening to NFTs, you don't want to have to separately query every single exchange. So we have built an abstraction. We call them spells because we have this whole wizard spells thing going on. And for example, there's one called NFT.trades, which has trades across every single NFT exchange. Makes it much, much easier to work with that data. So that's Dune. That's the Dune network and the Dune community. And my job as community lead is working to make sure that this network gets stronger and stronger, and making sure this viral growth loop where our wizards create these dashboards, and these dashboards go out into the world and they fetch more people who come back and become wizards, keeps working strong, which is a combination of marketing, education, partnerships, ecosystem building, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's section one, that's the Dune community. But I think the big question, or the topic that I want to talk about from this is why do they do it? Why do these wizards go out and build these dashboards? Previous speaker was talking about peer review. There's no incentive, right? You don't get paid. No one knows who did it. What are they getting out of this? Because, putting my cynical hat on for a moment, people generally don't do something for nothing for a very long time. And what I want to talk about is that what they get, which is not money, but I think it's something that is arguably even more valuable than money, which is reputation. Because reputation is the thing that can get you a job. It can get you opportunities. So I want to talk about how reputation works on Dune, and specifically how decentralized reputation works, which is different to centralized reputation. So what do we mean by traditional reputation? Firstly, what is reputation? I think, I'm not going to try and get too philosophical here, but it's generally this idea that if you walk into a room and meet somebody you've never met before, how seriously they're going to take you and how much capital and resources they're going to give you. So Dune is I would say, the first decentralized reputation system for data analysts. I'm going to talk a bit more about that and about other decentralized reputation systems in a bit, but just bear with me on that one. So typically, if you want to be a data analyst pre-Dune and you want to build up your reputation, firstly, you're going to go to university. So the way you're building reputation is you're doing a degree. You might do a PhD or not, that kind of depends on the career path you go. And then you're going to go through the various levels of promotion through a company hierarchy, and I've put, these are typical titles that you get in a company. You'll be a junior data analyst, a senior data analyst, a staff data analyst. Note these numbers, they're powers of 10. This is actually really important. I've noticed empirically, and I'm going to talk about this again later. A lot of things I'm going to talk about later, I hope I remember them all. That this is a power law, and these things always tend to be distributed as power laws, and not just any power law, a specific power law. But what I want to highlight on this slide is that the decision as to whether you get to progress up to the next rung of this reputation ladder is decided by people above you. And so in that way, it's traditional reputation. The further you get up, the fewer and fewer people who decide that. And I'm sure I don't have to convince you that's problematic for a variety of reasons, and especially when looking at science, we'll talk about in a bit. So Dune's reputation system is very different. In Dune's reputation system, your reputation is determined by other wizards and people using your dashboards. If you can create valuable content and do a little bit of marketing for it, you do have to kind of get it out there in the world, and people think it's useful, then they will star your dashboard. And the more stars you get, the more that will increase your sphere of influence, the more economic opportunities will come to you. And the people who have built the most successful dashboards in Dune, and there are a few that have like 3, 4, 5,000 stars, have built their entire career on Dune and have become essentially influencers in the data analytics community and wield a great deal of like reputational power, as it were. But this reputation is entirely managed by their peers. And also because this is a power law, and these are real numbers from Dune, so like very roughly, like the top 10 wizards have over 2,000 stars. The top 100 wizards have over 200 stars. Because it's a power law, the vast majority of people are usually going to be at the bottom. And so it's a bottom-up reputation system. So your reputation is determined by people who are actually using what you do rather than people who are further up kind of thinking about what you do and maybe being like removed from the actual impact of it. And this is really, really powerful. There's this famous phrase in science that science proceeds one funeral at a time. And I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that reputation is managed by people further up in the hierarchy. And if they have a fixed idea about what is good science and what is not good science, then it's only when the top of the hierarchy gets cleaned out and more people can move in that those ideas can progress. But on Dune, if next week there is a new trend in crypto and a lot of people think this is really important and we need to make analytics about it, no one's going to have to go and convince a product manager at Bloomberg that we need to start tracking this data. There's no one further up in the hierarchy who has to approve it. Someone can just make a dashboard, a bunch of people can start it, and people can build that reputation on that new field, if you like. So that's decentralized reputation. I've been up at Dune for about 7 or 8 months so far. And it started to hit me that this decentralized reputation thing is quite powerful, but also how you see the same pattern play out across different platforms and different verticals. So these are all just screenshots of like the like button or the star button from different tools. And this is kind of my attempt to synthesize that into like a single table with these different platforms built around the same idea of basically solving the reputation problem for different communities of practice. I think GitHub is probably the easiest one to explain. Like GitHub's amazing thing is that it enabled primarily open source software developers to build their reputation and to share great software with the world. So the product that people are making is software, and the role that it develops a reputation system for is developers. And like, I'm so used to, like, I'm a software engineer, I'm so used to living in that world, I can't imagine what it was like before then, but it's incredibly powerful. But like, you see more and more of these reputations exist. The Twitter one is kind of a fun one, I thought, because I think that it mostly is actually the reputation system for thought leaders, but you've got Kaggle for ML models, Hugging Face for deep learning models. And I think Dune has kind of emerged as the reputation system for data analytics, which might sound surprising because like we're a crypto company, we're not a general purpose data analytics company. But the reason that's happened is because pre-crypto data was not very public and also not very general. So you had like data about this sector, and it tends to be like locked in like company data centers and very hard to access. Crypto is the first public by default data set that has like broad, both global and non-sector specific appeal. Which means it's the first data set that is like rich enough and interesting enough and actually public that you can build this kind of reputation system, which is why Dune has managed to position itself in this space. So I'm about halfway through on time, so I think I'm looking good. I want to talk about DaySci communities. Yeah, good. This is going to stray now from my experience and more towards thinking about how some of these lessons apply to what might happen in I keep saying DaySci, it's DeSci, isn't it? DeSci communities in the following years. So a few slides ago, I had this, going to go back, this kind of network diagram, the idea that like the Dune network is made up of wizards working with data and producing insights. This is obviously a gross simplification, but I'm going to say that science is kind of a similar thing. Like when you strip back all of the institutions that we built around it, it really just is like scientists working with tools, bringing in capital, designing, running experiments, and financing it all. And this kind of iterative process of like experimentation, discovery, sharing knowledge, yada, 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 is what kind of defines science. And so we might kind of compare this network with the one I had before. And there's two things I want to talk about. First is like, how do these connect, what creates these connections in the network? So with the Dune network, most of these connections are basically, you go to Dune.com. So like if you want to query the data, you just go to Dune.com. If you want to fork, you go to Dune.com. The only part of this network that doesn't happen on Dune is really the kind of sharing and discovery bit, which tends to happen mostly on Twitter, but also, blog posts, news articles, things like that. I think in science, it's a bit different. Firstly, how does it look at the moment? I think if you look at these network connections, there's like 3 key intermediaries that define this network. So you've got publishers who define like collaboration, because if you want to get your ideas out in the world, you have to convince them that this is the valuable thing and other people should hear about it. Then you've got the ability to actually use equipment. The thing that makes science quite different from all these other examples I gave you is that the product in all these cases is an information product. So it's just data in a data center, but science is not about data. Science is about like atoms, or a lot of it is, some of it is about data. And so you need to have equipment, real world stuff, and you need to have money as well. And so there are intermediaries there that manage that, labs, which is also standing for universities. And then for funding, you've got funding bodies who decides who gets what. And I think in DeSci, the idea is that we're trying to replace these intermediaries with something a bit more open and decentralized. I'm not going to dwell on this because it's not really what it talks about, but I'm just setting up for the reputation thing. The question is then like, what defines reputation in DeSci? And again, I'm sure we're going to find it in the next few years, but I think it's going to, at the moment you have a system which is intermediated by a few different players, but I think these are the main 3 that come to mind for me. And again, when you're going through the scientific journey, it's this power law where you're trying to go each order of magnitude, you get to the next level of the ladder. So you go undergraduate, PhD, postdoc, professor, whatever. And again, you have this kind of top-down system where your ability to progress to the next level is determined by people above you who decide whether or not you are worthy. So whether that's you doing your exams at university, whether that's your PhD viva, whether that's getting accepted for a postdoc, right? And a lot of the frustration, I think, comes from, again, there's this idea that the incentives to the people above you in the hierarchy are very different to the people below you in the hierarchy. The people below you want science to progress, they want new ideas to happen. The people above you kind of want to a large extent, keep their position in the hierarchy, and they don't want too much disruption. And my lesson from Dune is that I expect that once the technology is there, we're gonna pivot to a new reputation system, which is based on peers and is more bottom up. I'm sharing that just. This is more like me taking an experience that I've had at Dune, where I've seen how powerful this has been for changing the way data analysts have reputation, and imagining that a similar dynamic, and then seeing that dynamic play out across so many verticals. In a few years' time, I could imagine new verticals here, about, I don't know, genetics, let's say, something like that, and having a new reputation system of people working in genetics. But to get there, you need like you need a network to be. You need the information to flow more freely through the network, and the capital to flow more freely through the network to enable that to exist. Okay, so got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to go back to a few more concrete things and show you how to actually quantify the growth of DeSci using Dune. So this is the riskiest bit because it's demo time. So in principle, anything that happens on chain, you can use Dune to look at. So I'm going to take the example of the VitaDAO auction. So VitaDAO, I assume most of you know, is it's a DAO that is managing decentralized funding for longevity research. So I've got a news article here, and I'm going to show you the thought process that you might go through if you wanted to validate how much money they've raised. So they raised, at the time of writing, they raised about $5.1 million, but this was all on chain. And so if it's on chain, you can actually validate what happened. So demo time. So I'm gonna, this article is a second article that comes up on Google if you search for VitaDAO. And I'm showing you this from the beginning because to show you like the thought process we go through if you're using Dune. So what I see is that they use a Gnosis token auction. So imagine that you have no idea what a Gnosis token auction is. You can Google that, and you will find first link here that kind of looks plausible. So they raised money. It's an auction. That makes sense. Okay, they must have been selling something in return. people bought something. If I'm looking around here, I'm going to click auctions at the top here. There's a search bar. Go look for Vita. Okay, there's 3 auctions. I'm looking for the one in 2021. I could click through that, but I noticed that there's an auction ID, number 30. So that's already quite a lot of information. That's probably enough to start to do something useful in Dune. So I'm going to go to Dune. Let me zoom in a bit. I'm going to make a new query. Everything in Dune starts with a query. And I want to look for a Gnosis auction. So we know that a Gnosis auction must be some kind of smart contract. So we're going to look under decoded projects for that. I'm going to look for Gnosis auction. I happen to know it's on the Ethereum blockchain, but you could check that. That looks about right. Easy auction. So if you ever work with Solidity, you'll know that there are, firstly, there are function calls. So Dune decodes every function call. Every time a function is called, it goes to a separate table. And it also captures every event. So you can emit events, or what they're called logs, I think, in Solidity, which allows, it's designed to allow Solidity developers to like debug what is going on, but it also turns out to be super handy for data analytics as well. So if we wanted to understand which event we're interested in, you can do a bit of guessing. So I don't know if it was, if you were to read through that, what's the one that would tell you how much money was raised in the auction. You can also do something like go to Etherscan, if you ever use that. You could paste in the contract address. I happen to know that if you just type in easy auction, it's going to bring up the contract for you. You could look up the contract itself, look at the source code. So that's just boilerplate. Somewhere in there is the actual source code. I think it's that one, yeah. I happen to know that the event that we're interested in is the easy auction auction cleared. An auction cleared event is called after an auction is completed, and it basically takes all of the token that was raised and sends it out to the person who's running the auction, essentially. So we can have a look at that table. We can see there's an auction ID in it, so that's a good place to start. We know from the Gnosis auction page that the auction ID was number 30, so we're going to put that in. So I'm going to do select star from, pop the name of the table in. I'm sure this is going to go wrong at some point. Firstly, I'll show you what the data looks like, so we can just do select star limit 10. Just quick hands up, who here has written SQL before? Okay, so some of you know what's going on. So you can see that's what the data looks like, and Dune supports this kind of iterative approach where you kind of check what the data looks like, query it, do stuff with it. We're interested in auction ID 30. It's a varchar, so it's a string. So we're going to do and hopefully that runs quickly. There we go. So we've got one row which is reassuring. That's the auction ID number 30, and you can see at the end here we've got sold auctioning tokens and sold bidding tokens. That's probably what we want. So the auctioning token was Vita. The bidding token was Ether. So people were basically spending Ether to get Vita. So I want the sold bidding tokens. That's all I really want. That number is enormous because it's in Wei, which is 1 to the minus 18 Ether. So we need to now divide. If we want to get an Ether, we need to divide it by 1 to the minus 18. I also happen to know that that is a string, so we need to cast it to a double, but that's something I learned yesterday. So if we run that again, that's the total amount of Ether that was spent. If we want to know what that is in terms of dollars, you could do this on Dune, by the way, we have all the prices information, but I'll just quickly do like ETH to USD conversion. This happened, the auction happened in about July of 2021, so around there. So roughly speaking, it's about $2,000 per Ether, so let's call it that. So if we take, this is one of my favorite uses of Google, if we take that and multiply it by about 2,000, you can see I did this one before, it's about $5.1 million. So we can verify on-chain that that's the amount of money they raised. Of course, the neat thing about Dune is that you don't have to do this yourself because someone already did it for you. So I'm going to go and search Vita down here, and some of you probably already know in here, has 7 stars. Again, reputation system. Of all these dashboards, I know this is the one that's probably the one I can actually reliably trust. And I can click on that, and it's a beautiful dashboard showing how the auction progressed. You can see various things like ETH per user, for example. So I was talking, this kind of closed the loop when I was talking about community building. This is the community of VitaDAO. It's the people who've bought the Vita token. So you could now go and look at all of these people, try and understand who those wallets are, what they represent. And you can do this all with Dune. I happen to think that Dune's like DeSci dashboard ecosystem is quite underdeveloped. So I'm really looking forward to people kind of building out more stuff on here. At the moment, it's very, very much like, here are a couple of the protocols, here are some useful things about them. Where we'd want to be is like someone building out some much deeper dashboards covering like the entire state of DeSci funding, for example, broken down to the different DAOs, how much money, maybe like comparing the different kinds of approaches, how successful they are, how much yield they're delivering. But I guess we'll have to wait for that. So that's demo over, which was a success. That's great. I think I'm at time, so I will stop there. And thank you very much, everyone. It's really great to speak to you.